So this was a long time coming. Throughout the years of browsing Touhou Fanworks, there's two big names that constantly popped up over and over again. One is the subject of another video, and I'm sure it's gonna be a treat getting to it eventually, especially now that things seem to be moving again, and the other is today's topic, a little series you might know under the name of Osana Reimu. I ignored it back then, you know, it just didn't really catch my attention, and besides, I had other important things to do, like playing Restart for the Sega Genesis. But I remember it always being accompanied by certain keywords like cute, wholesome, and sad, heart-wrenching, soul-crushing. Okay, I think you get the idea. A few years later, in the dead of night, wasting time before going to sleep, I remembered this series, and the images of a very young-looking Reimu and a familiar yokai that was a bit taller than I thought. Curiosity finally got to me, and I watched all of it right then and there. In retrospective, doing so before going to bed is what some people may define as a bad move. And then it lingered on my mind, like very few other Touhou stories have done. And obviously the fact that I'm making this video means that I still think about it to this day. And it's not just me, as this series has become a beloved classic for many fans, be it due to its characterizations, the cute silly moments, and of course the story, which leaves you wondering if things could have gone a different way. And that's really most of what people say when recommending the series. Watch it because it's sad, it'll make you cry and all that. And it has been a while since my time with it, so I do have to wonder if that's really all it has to offer, or if there's more to it than meets the eye. I decided this was as good a time as ever to finally go back to it, so join me as I revisit this tale of when Reimu Hakurei was small and the man-eating yokai was big. Before anything, let's address something about names real quick. Me and I assume most people that were around Touhou at the time know this series as Osana Reimu, and I think that name is still used plenty here in the Western sphere. However, the author themselves have confirmed that the actual name is YouReimu, Osana being a misreading of the kanji. For the sake of not dealing with whether I wanna go with what's familiar or what's correct, for the rest of the video I'm just gonna use the generally agreed on translation of Little Reimu, alright? Also, just for the record, for this video I've watched the translation by Masui subs. I can't speak for if it's actually better than the alternative, I just like having the text properly inserted into the video, okay? So, Little Reimu is another one of those hand-drawn video series, this time made by Joyfull, the same Joyfull who would then go on to make visuals for some of the music videos of Circle's List Triangle and Shinra Bansho. It was uploaded to Nico Nico starting on May 5th, 2011 and ending on February 24th, 2012, when the final two-part episode dropped, and the whole series has since then garnered millions of views, becoming quite the icon for both the Western and Eastern fanbases, always recommended as one of the most heartwarming and heartbreaking fanworks made for Touhou. The series gives us a view into the past of Gensokyo, a time when Reimu Hakurei was much too young to act as a Shrine Maiden, and so that role fell onto the previous Shrine Maiden, who also acts as Reimu's guardian, along with our other central character, Rumia, who looks much older and mature despite the story taking place in the past, which just raises more questions. Right away your story begins as nothing more than a slice of life, with the girls getting up to various antics, as we get to learn about their situation and relationship. It immediately reminded me of the manga Yotsubato by Kiyohiko Asuma, so much that I had to believe this aspect of Little Reimu was directly inspired by it, featuring the same enthusiastic and curious little girl, an apparent figure who has to deal with their whims while also bringing them up. By the way, I highly recommend reading Yotsuba if you haven't. I personally haven't gotten through all of it, but it's overall a pretty light and easy read that's fun all throughout. But we're not here to have fun, are we? We learn that Rumia is the man-eating yokai, whose sole purpose in life is to eat humans. Yet despite that, she's always left unfulfilled. No matter how much she eats, it never satisfies her appetite. Yukari warns Rumia to stop overeating before seeking the Shrine Maiden onto her, who completely beats her, of course. However, instead of killing her, she's left tied to a tree outside the shrine. And that's when Rumia first meets with Reimu, who, despite her mother's demands to let Rumia be, every day she prepares rice balls for her to the best of her ability, trying to get the clearly hungry yokai to eat something. It takes some time, but Rumia eventually gives in to Reimu's innocence. It's a pretty, by-the-book, feel-good moment, but I really like this interpretation of how Reimu would have been as a child, a naive and innocent girl who wants to find the best solution for everyone, who's unaware of what yokai really are and treats them as equals to her, so much that she tries to sate Rumia's appetite for humans with regular food, or leaves an umbrella with her on a rainy day. It's an aspect of Reimu that's very often overlooked in favor of making her the grumpy, greedy Shrine Maiden who solves incidents with violence, but I'd argue that it's the more important side to her character. She's someone someone who deeply cares for the well-being of others, and often ends up putting their needs before her own, even if she puts on the facade that she's just doing her job. And all of that is accentuated here, where she is a kid who hasn't yet grown to question and understand her actions or her own emotions, just acting out of the goodness of her own heart and doing what she feels is right, trying to help someone in need. And it works out in the end. She manages to save Irumia and gives her a new lease on life, a new purpose, a reason to live. She gives her something to eat that will actually keep her fed, at least for a little while longer. But Rumia's not the only one who's felt this way, as Reimu's mom also has to deal with her own darkness, walking the lonely path of a hardened shrine maiden, scored not only by yokai, but by her fellow humans as well, who see her as nothing but a monster. For most of the series, she's seen wearing various masks, which is partially also played as a gag with various references, but it's actually an important element to her character. She can't bear the gaze others place on her, the way they're horrified by what they see her as, a vicious and ruthless yokai exterminator, despite her doing it to protect humans. And she fears that someday, Reimu will come to see her that way too. It's not until Rumia presses on that she decides to finally take the mask off and show both her and Reimu what she really looks like, when she feels she's free from that gaze, at least around these two. And Rumia is immediately captivated, of course. And that's it, that's Little Reimu, this is where it ends, nothing else happens and they live happily ever after. Thank you for watching, remember to like and subscribe, and it's never that easy, is it? Well, as Yukari put it earlier, happiness can disappear in a flash, and when Reimu trips and injures herself, Rumia gets to see blood for the first time in a long while, reminding her of what she truly is. Confused and bewildered, feeling as if the life she longed for so much is suddenly being snatched away from her, she runs away into the forest, and so the final act begins. Of course, Rumia can't escape her nature forever. She needs to at least eat some humans to stay alive, which would be a simple solution. However, she can't bear the thought of doing that while having to look Reimu in the eye again. She can't go back home to the ones she loves so much while essentially being a murderer behind their backs. She had found the happiness she wished for, and she's gonna cling to it to the bitter end. Even when Reimu comes looking for her, when she feels her instincts kick in full force, when the opportunity to kill a human and finally end her suffering arises, she instead bites down on her own arm, using all of her strength to hold back, to protect the one she loves from herself, the Reimu who once saved her life. It's devastating. After getting her first taste of happiness, seeing Rumia fighting for her life, or rather giving up her life for the only ones who ever cared for her. However, as we learn from Yukari, it's quite the problem if Rumia ends up dying. The reason she must eat humans is to consume the darkness inside of them. Rather than emanating yokai, she's the yokai of darkness, and Gensokyo cannot exist without her. So the Shrine Maiden hatches up a plan, telling Rumia all the things they went through, all the time they spent together was all a lie. An act with the sole purpose of creating a copy of her that won't bother with such emotions and attachments. Of course, this revelation makes Rumia finally snap and attack the Shrine Maiden, and yet, despite getting the chance to kill her multiple times, she just can't bring herself to do it. Even if it was all a lie, even if all the moments they experienced were all just fabrications, the happiness Rumia felt, it was real to her. She completely surrenders to her fate as the Shrine Maiden prepares one last attack. In an act of self-preservation, it is Rumia who delivers the final blow, mortally wounding her opponent. And the Shrine Maiden finally tells the truth. She's to give up her life, her own happiness, for the one she loves most. With the last of her strength, using this moment of sorrow and confusion as an opening, she places a charm on Rumia, sealing her current form away, and offers herself to the yokai to feed on her darkness, being that she alone was holding on to enough to keep Rumia fed for many years to come. Yukari enters the scene to gaze at the aftermath, and briefly contemplates the idea of just killing Rumia right then and there, for a moment ignoring the consequences that would bring. A selfish act of revenge, viewing Rumia as responsible for the death of the girl she loved. She decides against it though, and leaves the yokai to live as she pleases, finally free from the chains that bound her for so long. The series ends with Yukari going around Gensokyo, erasing everyone's memories of the Shrine Maiden and the previous incarnation of Rumia. Later, as she is taking care of the soon-to-be Shrine Maiden, the Yokai of Darkness finally reunites with Reimu, and so as this story ends, a new one begins. When I first watched this many years ago, I did so purely out of curiosity for what people told about it, and I teared it up. Of course I did. Hell, I'm just a very emotional person in general, I'll cry from anything. And this is not a deep, complex story, let's not even try to pretend that it is more than what it is, but goddamn is it effective at what it sets out to do. So effective that, even watching it after all this time, even if I already know how it goes and what's gonna happen next, I'm still bawling my eyes out at various points. It's not a complex story, it doesn't have to be, but I think it is a very well written and well executed attempt at giving some of our characters a little bit of backstory. Little Reimu obviously plays heavily into the fanon of Ex-Rumia, or EX-Rumia, however you're supposed to say it. A version of Rumia that's way more powerful and typically looks more mature than her normal counterpart, who is said to be sealed by the ribbon she wears. That last part is directly based on Sun's comment in Rumia's profile from embodiment of Scarlet Devil, and is likely where this whole beat originated in the first place. Mind you, this is not the first appearance of Ex-Rumia. Simply from looking through the Pixiv tag, people were doing this as far back as 2008 at least, but it's definitely the more popular depiction of this bit of fanon, and probably what brought it over to the West. There's not really much else to say about it, but Little Reimu does decide to give its own explanation for a ribbon inheritance, if you will, and it's a nice detail that I really like. Rumia does have one at the beginning of the story, and you might be able to tell that it has the same design as the one Reimu wears in official Touhou art. You know, those white squiggly lines at the edges. The ribbon Reimu has in the series doesn't have those, and that's because around the halfway point she actually loses it, prompting Rumia to give her her own. And that's how Reimu's bow came to be. Meanwhile, Rumia gets the Shrine Maiden's ribbon, used as the charm to seal her powers. It's a little bit harder to pick up, but you could arguably also notice it from the very start if you're paying close attention, but it's that attention to detail that I really enjoy. There's a couple other moments of foreshadowing, like Rumia appearing visibly hungrier as she reaches her limit, which could very much be dismissed as a gag, but it is there and heralds the return of her true self. Or less aptly, Yukari setting up the flag by saying happiness can disappear in a flash. I think even if you somehow manage to approach this series with absolutely no spoilers nowadays, it gives you enough clues that this is not gearing towards a happy ending. And speaking of endings, let's talk about our previous Shrine Maiden for a bit. She's also based on another piece of fanon, Reimu Hakurei no Miko, literally previous generation's Shrine Maiden. Believe it or not, she actually originated as a character for the fighting game engine Mugen, but has since kinda become its own concept in the community, as Reimu's predecessor from before the spellcard rules came to be, who instead opts for a more physical approach to incident solving. I do believe once again that Little Reimu did play a part in the increasing popularity of this character. I already talked about what goes on with her in the story, but I did skip how all that fits in the final encounter. I didn't really know where to fit it, so we're talking about it here. Like I said, she wore masks to protect herself from the gaze of others, but also as a way to prevent others from seeing her true self, truly believing that she's a monster, until Rumia convinces her to take it off. However, during the final fight, the mask is back on. She's unable to bear the yokai she loves seeing her like that, and is unable to look her in the eye while doing this to her. In fact, during this whole sequence, they never see each other face to face, not even at the very end, after Rumia literally breaks the mask this time, breaks through the facade she's putting on. Even after all that, she just can't bring herself to face Rumia again. She feels she doesn't deserve that privilege after putting her through hell. The one thing that can feel like a bit of a cop-out is how everyone forgets everything at the end. It kinda feels like a way too convenient way to fix things and explain why these events are never really talked about again. And it does make the story of the previous Shrine Maiden more unnecessarily tragic, as if it wasn't tragic enough. But you know, way too convenient things are Yukari's specialty, so it's kinda fitting in that regard. Speaking of, it's really weird to see Yukari outside of her cold and calculating shell, showing a more vulnerable side, like when she snaps at Rumia or, of course, after losing her precious Shrine Maiden. I mean, you could say that for everyone really. Touhou is not a series that focuses on the emotions and feelings of its characters, but Yukari in particular, it's almost off-putting to see her go through it. It's also weird to see her straight up lose so hard. If you think about it, she's the one who got the short end of the stick here, forced to be the only one who remembers these events for the rest of her life. You gotta feel bad about her for once. I was originally also gonna briefly talk about the sequel YouReimu as well, but I'll have to leave that for another time as I believe I have more to say about it than I first thought. But to be honest, it's this fanwork that's still remembered and beloved by a big part of the community. For its cute moments, its bittersweet end that does a pretty good job at tying the events to the official work, its beautiful and charming characterizations and art, and oh man, the art! Joyfull has the range to go from light-hearted slice of life to shots of raw, unfiltered emotion that stab right through your heart. The look of despair in Rumia at the end, I couldn't get out of my head for a while. It does overuse the bloom filter a little bit at times, but it's nothing that ruined the experience for me. Overall, it's a fanwork that's really important to me personally, and rewatching it today, with the accumulated experience I've gathered over the years, allow me to get a bit of a different perspective of it and of myself as well. If you'll allow me to tell my side of the story for a bit, I'm someone who has struggled with depression, addictions and loneliness for a good portion of my life. I don't know how it is for other people, but for me, in the worst of times, when I really thought I hit rock bottom, it was just a paralyzing feeling. A constant paralysis where I just wasted away and let the days pass, where I turned to self-destructive coping mechanisms, where nothing I did gave me even the slightest satisfaction. When I saw Rumia in this story, it immediately reminded me of those days, of that very real feeling that no matter how much I ate, it never filled me up. This is where you hear an "oh, but then this happened and it changed my life forever and now I'm alright," and well, I have since received help and gotten better, but it's a ghost that still haunts me and often prevents me from doing the things I enjoy. It's the reason why my upload schedule is so inconsistent. It's the reason I quit streaming for a whole year. It's the reason I sometimes ignore friends and family in favor of isolating myself. And yet I'm still here. Back to it again, still struggling, still at an unsteady pace, but moving forward nonetheless. Watching this series today reminds me of those times, reminds me that the pain can suddenly return and beat you down into the ground again, that happiness can disappear in a flash, but it's precisely because of that I keep going. It's a constant reminder of what I don't want to become. I think it's easy to say things like "it's gonna get better" or "this too shall pass." Even though they may be true, they will ring hollow to someone stuck in their darkest depths. The reality is, it's only true if you want it to be true. It's only true if you're willing to climb out of that hole yourself, as many times as you need to. Others can throw you a rope to make it easier, but you're the only one who can take hold of it. And even, yes, sometimes you had to get beat down even further to gain the strength to stand back up. No one truly deserves to go through pain, and I'm 100% sure there's people who endured far worse than I have. But as long as it's there, might as well make the best of it and use that experience to become stronger. We don't have the luxury to simply get our memories erased and forget about the painful moments in our lives, but maybe that is for the best. Thank you so much for watching. As always, consider liking the video and subscribing to support the channel. I'll see you next stream.